Hi, it's Neve here and welcome back to my art journaling channel. Today I'm looking at using two colours, turquoise and red, in my journal. Now this is a colour combination that I used a long time ago in 2007 to create this mixed media journal. We did as a swap in a stamp group that we used to work in. So basically the premise was that each person got a spread and a month to complete a page in the journal. We passed it around our stamp group. So these are my initial pages, sort of highlighting the colours and giving a bit of a colour palette for people to use and how why I chose colours, and some sample pages that I created using the colours. So these are pages that other people in the group completed using the two colours red and turquoise. Now red and turquoise are near complements on the colour wheel. They're almost opposites but not quite, and they're really stunning. They stand out beautifully together and I love this colour combination, but it's really funny because I haven't used it since doing this journal. So the reason I'm using it now is in the Dina Wakley Media challenge, Dina Wakley Media Tribe challenge for this month is to use her colour wheel and her paints to explore a colour palette. So I chose to explore using turquoise and ruby again because I had so much fun doing this, and I found this on my shelf and it really inspired me to get the paints out and do it again. So I first of all gessoed my page, and I squeezed on some ruby paint and just spreading it out across the middle of my page, not being very careful about it. And I haven't really while I dried the gesso in the background, it's not 100% dry, so it's still able to move. While my page is really wet, I've put down the medieval crosses and got my wet wipes out, and I'm going to ghost the page so I get that white shining through. And I'm just buffing off the extra paint with the paper towel. Now I should probably, because it was starting to dry at this stage, spritz over the top of my paint with a little bit of water just to help it move again, but using a really juicy wet wipe does seem to work okay, and then just buffing the excess water off with the paper towel afterwards. So once I've finished doing this stencil, I'm going to add in the turquoise, and while I'm using the straight turquoise, I found that it needed a little bit more depth to the colour, so I actually used two turquoise type colours. One was the straight turquoise from the Dina Wakley paints, and the other one was her ocean, and mixing the two together just gave the blue colours a bit more depth to play with. So again, I'm not being really random with where I'm placing the paint, and here I am adding the ocean, and it just makes all the difference, adding that little bit of depth of colour to the page. I'm going to do the same technique with a stencil over the top to remove some of the paint and get some of that white coming through. So the stencil I'm going to be using is another Dina Wakley stencil with the vine leaves. Now the reason I chose these stencils, apart from the fact that I actually really like them, it's the reason why I bought them in the first place, was because I did buy a number of new stencils all at once. These ones got tucked away and I hadn't actually got them out, so you can see they're nice and clean, which is amazing for something that stays in my art room. Nothing stays clean for that long, so they're yeah, getting their first time use. So there was no more thought in the process than I need to get these used and on the page. Now the great thing about working with acrylic paints, which I'm loving at the moment, is the fact that if the layer below is dry, because it is a form of plastic, you can then just wipe off any excess paint while it's still wet. And I think that's one of the reasons the last few weeks I've been in a bit of a funk with my art journaling, because I got out a load of dye sprays, dilution sprays and mica sprays, and was trying to use those in my journal. And while I really love them, I just cannot build up the layers that I want to with them, because they blend into each other, which is the nature of it. And if you make a mistake, you can't fix it because it's soaked into the page. You can't wipe it off like you can with acrylic paint. So it was really, really frustrating me. I wasn't getting the results that I wanted to. And as soon as I started back working with acrylic paints again, I just found my mojo again. So it was a good lesson for me to learn that you've got your favourite materials for a reason. And while I love having the ink sitting there and staring at me, I need to remember, for me, they're a top layer thing. I need to go back to what I love. So I've got this beautiful contour face stencil as well, which is another Dina Wakley stencil. And just using some black gesso and a sponge, sponging it through to get those faces on the page. Previously saw them put down, it was a very old piece of scrapbooking paper, one of those die cut papers that they used to have, that I was going to sort of put across the middle or a stencil through, but I decided I wanted to go with these faces instead and just have them sort of sitting in the page. So I've been struggling with stenciling at the moment too, because I didn't have any sponges, but I went down to my local cheap store, dollar store in town, and they had these makeup wedges on sale for $1 each. So I bought a number of packets, and it made all the difference because I was able to get a really nice stenciled image in the end. So just drying this off, and I don't know what it is about the makeup of the Dina Wakley black gesso, but it dries really, really quickly, which I love. So going in with a food ball pen just to extend some of those extra lines down to the edge of my page, putting in a little bit of extra hair just to make it a little bit, make the image make a little bit more sense on the page so it's not floating in the air, and ground it. And while I was doing this, I decided that the space next to the faces probably needed something else there. It needed to be sketchy, and I was considering drawing something myself, but then I thought about the Dina Wakley torso stamps that she's just brought out, sort of abstracty stamps. This is a Donna Downey stencil, which again was part of the massive stencil purchase that I had a few weeks ago, and it was just calling out to go on this page. And it was the reason I chose it for this page too, I think, was because I was getting back to my roots. As I said before, I was really unhappy with what I was doing recently. I was creating stuff, but I wasn't happy with what I was creating. So just going back to, you know, this is why I'm doing it, exploring a colour scheme, making sure it's happy. And you can see I splodged through in one section, and again, this is why I love acrylic paints, because I was able to go with a wet wipe off where the mistake was and re-stencil over it, so you don't see that there's, you can actually read what it's saying. And this mantra on the stencil about, you know, I love drippage, I love layers and so on, it just speaks so much to me because it's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. So it was nice to have this sort of reminder to myself in my art journal that this is why I'm doing it, this is what I love doing, and this is what makes me happy. The colours on the page make me really happy too. I'm just loving that ruby and turquoise colour. So going back in and fixing up another little splodge that was there. There was one up the top with the fingers, but you could still read it, so I was happy to leave that. And just drying off the surface, again I used the black gesso to do this, the Dina Wakley black gesso, which dries really, really quickly. Going back in, using up all my excess paint, so I have no idea what's going to go on this page after I'm finished. I'm sure I'll come up with something. Now, just a word to the wise, I don't usually clean my stencils, and this is a good example why I don't. Because they're all tiny little letters, I was actually rubbing quite hard to get the paint off, and I was bending over some of the little in-between bits in the letters for the K. The little triangle at the bottom of the K was bending out and so on, which is obviously why I was getting the seepage through my stencil in the first place. So when you are cleaning those stencils, just be incredibly careful and don't do what I did, basically. I know some people keep a tub of water next to their desk and just drop their stencils in afterwards and let them soak. That would be a great idea, but I know what I'm like, and I would probably just go in and, you know, kick the bucket, literally, and soak everything around me. So here are the torso stamps I was talking about, and I'm just putting those into that space in the corner, again, sort of just to ground the faces and the figures. They're really loose images, which I love. There's so much you can do with them. They're kind of abstract and they're kind of not. So you see I'm not using the block to stamp. The reason for that is I'm getting to the end of my journal. It's getting very bulky and it's not sitting as flat as it used to. And what I'm doing here is I've got some excess tissue paper that was sitting around on my desk, and I've just stamped out the images again, and I'm going to make a mask. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to stamp another image in between those two figures, but I don't want the lines going through what I've already got. So by using the piece of tissue, it blocks out the image and protects it, and it means whatever you stamp will go into the background rather than the foreground. It's a great technique to have, and if you're doing small enough images, a really good tip is to do that onto a post-it note, because it's already got the adhesive on the back, so you can actually stick it down and not have to worry about it moving. By using sort of slippy tissue paper like I was using, it may have slipped off, and I think in one instance in a moment it sort of does blow off. You can see it just move slightly there. It didn't really worry me because, again, this is sort of rough and ready, but if you wanted to be really precise about it, using a post-it note or something like that that's got a little bit of adhesive in the background really helps to hold it in place. And while I had the masks there, there is a bit of a dip in this page. I thought I'd go around the edge of it as well, just to continue that image over. So this is pretty much the end of my page. I was looking at it for a while, and I think in a moment you'll see in the video it sort of stops there for a second. It was me considering, have I got enough on this page? Because again, it's quite simple for me. It only took about 20 minutes to make this page, but I actually learnt from my mistakes, and you know, enough is enough and know when to stop. So I'm really glad that I did. While I was doing this and I had the paints out on the desk, I decided to recreate one of the pages that was in my original journal, which was in a Claudine Helmuth style, using the bright colours and the flowers and the dilution shimmer sprays on the flowers, which I really enjoyed too. So I hope you got some inspiration today. Thanks for watching.